Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job. Welcome back, parent educators, and that is going to be our theme today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have a chance and you haven't already, head down into the show notes and you'll see a link there on how to support the podcast. Check out our Gumroad page, find out our YouTube channel that is growing, hopefully exponentially and not just, linearly. So thank you guys for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about that kind of sticky first-time educator. We know there's some new listeners, and it's the beginning of the year. It's August when we are recording this right now. I think it's coming out in September timeframe. Mm-hmm. So there are going to be a bunch of parents who are first-time educators, and they're a little concerned about that. And they've been a parent, and they've done all the parenting things, and they've learned and made mistakes along the way. But now all of a sudden, they've got to be an educator, and they have to now teach and then balance these two things. It's not... a teacher at a school just has to educate. They have to be a disciplinarian, but it's not their kid, right?
Yeah.
You have a lot of vested interest in these kids, and you're also the parent. And when you're not educating, you want to have fun with your kids, and you don't want to have that education mar, the parental experience or even just the friend experience. Like our kids are our friends, right? And
to some extent that's true. And I think there isn't enough focus on this shift for parents.
This was a big scary thing for me.
Yeah, and it's a big mindset shift that they have to go through. So I think it's important that we talk about this. It's a completely new role. You're no longer just their parent.
Yeah, and I think the fear of like, how do I need to act differently when I'm a educator, and how do I have
and how will this affect my relationship with my kids? I think that's a worry that a lot of parents have too. So one of the big things about becoming a parent educator is it's really a shift in mindset. And it's not just how you think about it, but it's also a shift in skill set. So there's two things have to happen at once. You got to get yourself kind of in the mode of what you need to do, and then you have to dig up some skills you may not have known you had, or acquire some new skills that you haven't used in the past. And so that can be a really scary thing for folks.
Well, and luckily you're a parent, and with parenting, everything is evolving all the time. Just when you get over the hump of potty training or them sleeping through the night, then you have a new problem. You have more attitude and more sass or whatever.
We're in a sass phase right now.
We're in a heavy sass phase right now. And, every time there's something new and we have to pivot and we have to learn, what techniques do we have to use, or how do we approach these issues, and, how do we grow with our learners and whatnot. So you have to do the exact same thing when it comes to being an educator, right?
Right. And I think we need to recognize that just because you're, a parent educator and you're in the middle of homeschooling, let's say, doesn't mean that you're not switching hats back and forth constantly.
Exactly,
It's not like you say okay, we're going to be homeschooling for the next 3 hours and I'm going to be in my complete parent educator mode. There's going to be swapping constantly, right? 1 minute you're educating, the next somebody's in timeout for poking somebody else with a pencil. So, right? So there's times when, you've got to keep switching, and flipping that hat on and off is something that takes some practice and getting used to.
Yeah, it's not just about you being an educator, right? It's also about your children becoming students. And for some of these, for some of us homeschooling, they never went into, a public school or a private school. So they never actually had that experience of becoming a student.
Mm-hmm.
They may have done some preschool and understood that they go to preschool to play and learn little things. But, this is where we're starting to sit down and do things, especially if you have, a younger student. But you may have your own challenges. And we had a bunch of episodes about deschooling. If you've taken a student out of the public school, they have some expectations as well as being a student, and maybe in a homeschool environment, it's a little bit different. So there's a little bit of a, adaptation that has to happen both on your side, but also on your student side.
Exactly. And the lines will be blurred between the roles, right? It's not really strict. So you're switching hats back and forth. And even when you have your parent educator hat on, you might still be, half parent, right? Exactly. Or 60% parent. Right? So it is a little bit blurry. But this is about creating an environment where you can learn with your kids as a partnership. I think that's the thing that I don't see stressed enough in homeschool literature is the partnership aspect of this. And it really helps. I think it helps our parental mindset to think about it as a partnership rather than a top-down kind of driven thing.
It's the key word, the partnership is
or
the key
unschooling, child-led, right? You hear about both of those kind of options. And I prefer to think of it, whoever's, deciding what they want to learn. I just like that partnership, thinking about it as the two of you or the group of you together, right? Your team.
Exactly. So let's get into a little bit of the challenges around, becoming this parent educator. The first one is kind of this pedagogical knowledge, the fact that you have to learn or know certain information that you're going to be presenting to your learner, whether it's a kindergartner and you're teaching them how to write numbers, that's fairly easy, but you could have a sixth grader and you have to talk about the water cycle and the environment, right? And that may be something you don't have full knowledge of.
Right, or you didn't study in a really long time.
Yeah, exactly.
I hear constantly from parents that are like, I was bad in school. Like I didn't perform well in math. Now I have to teach math. I feel really uncomfortable. We have a friend who feels super uncomfortable teaching middle school science.
Yep.
She didn't do poorly in it, but it's been so long and she just feels really unprepared. So that can be a challenge to be prepared for.
She may have a vision of what that means,
right?
And whether or not that is correct or not is,
my vision includes overheads. I don't know about yours, and a giant TV strapped to a cart that they wheeled into science class, but
and play a little VHS
while we dissected a worm.
Yeah, we did a frog on ours. Yeah.
Right. So that's one of them. And one of the things that you can do to help yourself feel better about that is to find sources to help you pre-study. This is what teachers do.
Well, and this is also something you're doing right now with our ancient history. If you've watched some of our videos online, we've been actually talking about books that the parents can read along with the journey to, bring an additional element of knowledge and this pedagogical knowledge that they can bring to the learning experience. There's nothing to be said that you can't do this as well. And I think personally for me, doing all of this around the world, and now we're in ancient civilizations, and as we continue to move on through all these curriculums, I find really invigorating learning this, sometimes for the first time, but sometimes for the second time, as an older adult, I'm enjoying this and I'm getting an excitement around it. And I think I'm, as an educator, bringing that excitement to my children, and they're seeing that I'm excited and we're learning and we're all learning together. I think it brings a unique aspect that maybe they don't get in a normal public education.
I think we as homeschoolers have to embrace this concept of being lifelong learners because we are learning with our kids. It's not just about teaching them, it's about growing ourselves. So finding ways to pre-study, whether that's finding a YouTube video about that math concept that you're going to be teaching, or finding a book, or just fully reviewing the lesson and making sure you feel comfortable with it before you're going to present it. That's what a teacher in a public school would do. Yeah. A lot of the education that teachers have is around managing a classroom and kind of those kind of things. A lot of teachers don't have, it's not like they walk in the first day that they're become a teacher in whatever subject and they're an expert in that subject. Teachers are doing a lot of studying themselves as well. They're going home and saying, hey, this week I'm going to be teaching about the biology of the cell, and I'm going to do a bunch of research on that. And you can do that same thing too. So find good sources of things. If something scares you, that's a great thing to embrace and say, okay, I'm going to start and learn this. And then you can feel in a more comfortable place to learn it with your child or to teach it to your child, depending on the age, right? This may be an age where you learn it with them, and that's an okay thing to do too. If you find a great source to teach you, maybe that's a great source to help teach your kids as well.
And even just beyond going out to learning the information, one of the things I think a lot of teachers have, especially through experience, is seeing the breadth of all the different types of kids and understanding here are some different methods I can implement and use in order to teach these students. And for us, we're going to, an N=1 issue. With the teacher, they may have like 3 or 4 years of experience. They may have a number of kids that are 200 or 300, and they've seen different things and they've tried different things and they've tried a wide variety. For us, we're just trying to figure out with the one kid, right? And that could be a little bit
or the small group.
Yeah, we have a very small sample size. So for us, it's kind of hard to, find out what is most effective, find out what methods work best. I spent a year or so researching reading methods and reading tricks and reading, activities.
Trying to figure that out.
Trying to figure out what it would take to get my oldest to begin to start reading and helping her along that path and listening to podcasts and reading articles and whatnot. What do I need to do? What am I doing wrong? And in the end, it was, you just have to keep working, and, eventually got through it. But, I was trying different activities. I was trying different methods. I was approaching things in different ways.
Different ways to crack that nut.
Exactly. And that's kind of that going with the enjoyment of you learning the topic, but also learning how to teach that topic in many different ways is another challenge that we as educators have to be ready for and be able to prepare for.
Yeah, and maybe that involves getting a tutor. Outsourcing this might be the right answer, especially if you got a middle school student or an early high school student that's doing something in math or science. This is a great point to say, hey, maybe it's Khan Academy for math because they're going to teach this better. And if the student needs support, you can look to a tutor. You can look to other online sources. You can look to an older homeschool student. We have some friends that have homeschoolers that live next door that are a few years older. And so when they come across something that's difficult, maybe they go to one of those older students to tutor the younger.
Yep.
Our daughter's going to be learning an instrument at school this year. And one of the things that we talked to her teacher about was, hey, is there another homeschool student that might already play this instrument that could spend a little extra time with her? Yeah. And it was like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. So don't forget about the homeschool community. And, a tutor doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that you go down to a learning center and take them to a tutor, or have someone come to your house. It could be another homeschooler relationship.
Well, and we're even doing this with our oldest at the parent partnership that we go to. A lot of her classes are, singing and woodworking and all these fun kind of extracurricular activities.
Yeah, they're just all.
But we did a reading assessment last year, and she had to do this reading test with a teacher, and she really liked this teacher. And we found that this teacher was teaching a reading class. And, we said, hey, we're going to continue doing our reading curriculum. We're going to do everything we normally do. But she really liked this teacher. It doesn't hurt my feelings as the educator that she, was excited about this teacher, or this teacher, gave her some excitement around reading. So if you're at a parent partnership, or if you're at a co-op, and just like what you said, if maybe there's a next door neighbor or your homeschooling, friend down the street is really good at teaching reading, maybe you do a swap. And, maybe she'll once a week, she does a little bit of a reading lesson with them, and they just get it from a different angle. And a lot of times, think about like yourself, listening to new topics and new things. Sometimes you got to get it from multiple points of view, and then you finally, grok the information. And children are no different. And so sometimes you may need like an outside source, like a tutor or another parent or a co-op teacher, or like in our parent partnership, we opted not to send her to like a Spanish class or some other type of thing. We went with the reading class because we know reading's important. It's important to continue to cultivate that. And we saw this kind of spark in her eyes and an excitement. We said, let's run with this and see what happens. So it doesn't hurt our feelings. It doesn't hurt my feeling to say, let's get a little bit of help or try something in a different way. And you may have to do that as well. Yeah.
And the message here is
be open. Be open.
Yeah. Be open and don't be afraid of it. There are many ways to get things done. It doesn't have to be you. Don't let that scare you off, and just don't let that, hurt this adaptation time, when you're kind of thinking about, oh man, how am I going to tackle this? There's a way. You'll figure it out. Everything can be taught, whether by you or someone else. There's options.
And so moving on from challenges, we have this kind of, you're assuming this pedagogical teaching, I'm going to be delivering information to you, child, and you will then learn and be, enlightened. We talked a little bit about it, but teaching techniques, understanding how to teach certain things. And, when we are new teachers, and I fell right into this, we have some vision of how to educate, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times those visions of education tend to be the things that we got last. So whether that's college or, high school.
It's freshest in your mind.
This is the freshest thing in your mind. And you, like most of us, we don't really remember what our teachers were like in second grade. We may have some memories here or there that it was fun, or I remember this teacher doing this thing, but do you remember your second grade teacher teaching you sight words? You probably don't.
Nope.
And so how did they approach that? We can't remember that. And remember, if we are getting one of these, when we have one of these early learners, if we approach it like, the last thing I remember is a college class, well, okay, that's not going to work, or if you approach it from like what you remember high school being like, that may not be the best way to go. And the techniques, I think, are gonna matter, and you're gonna have to spend a little bit of time working through those. What's nice is when you have a curriculum like an All About Reading or a Math Mammoth or Right Start Math or any like Build Your Library or Torchlight or Blossom and Root. When you have these curriculums, they're helping you through that because they're giving you the activities and they're giving you those techniques. Whatever curriculum you end up choosing at home, they're going to help you through that. And a lot of times they're scripted or they've given you those activities.
And you might grab something and gravitate towards something that's more
absolutely.
prescriptive at the beginning as you're making this adaptation, right? You want the information that you're giving to your learner to be engaging, for them to be able to uptake it easily, for it to be fun and entertaining. That's not a skill that you develop overnight. I kind of liken this a little bit to like public speaking. I've done a lot of public speaking training, and I know you have too.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that you start and you're nervous and you're jittery and you all the time. Yeah. You don't have coherent thoughts. It's all of that. But after you get some experience, then you'll find the way to connect with your audience, to emote in your voice. It's all of those things. And as a parent educator, it's really the same thing. You have to find a way to connect with this audience of your children. And all children are going to learn a little bit differently and have different interests and things that get them excited. We're doing ancient Egypt right now, and our kids are just like super excited about how the gross parts of how they make mummies, and they're really connecting with it. And so you're kind of like leaning into that, and they're into it. You might have another kid who is really connected to things that are outdoors and just really does things that way. So this is a part about learning about your students and also learning about yourself. And kind of honing your skills. But I know that that's a hard thing to adapt to if you've never formally taught anybody anything. And you never had too when you started with our daughter and you were like, okay, how do I go about this?
Well, especially when I started with Torchlight, we did the pre-K curriculum, and I thought it was a really nice entry into homeschooling because it was very straightforward. It was very prescriptive, and it was a lot of reading of children's books and doing activities. And that's pretty easy for the most part, but I can imagine if you have your first homeschooling experience as, a second grader or a fourth grader, that's going to become, you're going to have to hit the ground running a little bit more. But there may be some, element that, we're running with some experiential learning, focusing on that, doing project-based learning with your student and being involved with it, kind of getting excited and feeling out how children learn. Because with a lot of us, we are not part of the learning experience. We don't sit in on the public schools. Right. We don't sit in on the preschool classes. We just don't do these things. And all of a sudden now we have to be the educator. And this could be a scary thing. So starting out with that experiential learning and project-based learning, helping, get that experience and whatnot, I think is a good way to kind of get going.
Right. And the other thing is gather feedback from your student as you go along. Yeah. What do they like? What do they not like? Oh, I love it when you tell silly stories. That helps me understand that part of history, whatever. Yeah. And you'll find your groove, but this is about, being flexible, trying a few things. It's not going to all work all the time. There are some days when it doesn't work, even though our learners' styles. It's some days the tried and true methods don't work. So don't get kind of caught up in that. Like look at the overall trend.
And it doesn't mean it's going to change the next day. Like you just may have like a weak day. Like I had a day the other day where we were doing the activities and it was a grind. It was like, oh man, this is not going to be good. And so I just bailed on the reading portion and then I made her just do a little bit of the math and I just called it for the day because I just knew she wasn't feeling it that day and I wasn't going to push it. The next day we made up for it. Right. So it's not like you have to toss out the techniques every day, but like what you said, being able to anticipate, learn, and then get the feedback that, it sounds weird to ask a 5-year-old how they like the curriculum you're using, but they will give you an honest answer. And what's really cool is that they want to feel like they're being heard as well. And I think that will help build, going back to the word that you chose earlier, the partnership. Cultivating that partnership, I think, is the key thing because the sooner you can find out when something's wrong or the sooner you can find out the right path, the better. So you don't have to go down the wrong paths. You don't have to do the wrong things. You don't have to discover that when everyone's at their heads and they're knocking heads together and you're upset. If you can find that out earlier, man, that just makes life so much easier. I mean, it's so obvious to say that, but when you are in the moment, you can feel like I'm just banging your head against the floor and going, what is going on
Why
here?
can't I get through this?
Why can't I get through this? Yeah, it's crazy.
So I think it's too about building a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously have a relationship with your children already, but you are changing some of the parameters of that relationship. And so you're going to be learning about each other in new ways. They don't know what it's like to have you as a teacher and not just mom or dad. And you don't know what it's like to have them as a student. Even if you did some things for preschool and stuff, a lot of that is really play-based when you're actually going to get into like teaching them to read and this. So it's a new relationship learning for both of you. But don't stress. It's an evolution. The relationship will evolve. Your teaching techniques will evolve. Eventually, you'll be the teacher that you want to be. But like you said, I don't remember my early teachers. So in some aspects, I don't know the teacher I want to be. Exactly. But you can feel when it's not going right. Yeah, you can feel when you're not in the groove, and you can feel when like, oh, today was easy, and I had fun, and they had fun, and we got a lot done. It's like, okay, whatever I did here was working. And then you build on those positive experiences as your skill grows.
Exactly. And I think the revelation that you're going to make over that time frame is the key is patience and adaptability. And the key is patience. And the funny thing is I actually had a thought experiment the other day. It's like, oh, okay. Our youngest is in running start and she's off at community college, and maybe I start working again. And the guy sits, I'm getting interviewed, and the person across from me asks me, what have you learned over the last 15 years not working, and now you want to come back into tech? What have you learned? And my answer is always going to be patience. I have learned patience more than anything else in this world. And especially with young learners, and I think the patience issue, going back to it evolves over time. The patience at the beginning is understanding that this stuff is hard.
Yeah.
Like reading is hard and math is hard for these young kids to begin to understand. And, some learners will just run with it, right? Oh, I got a reader who read super easy. I have a kid who likes math, right? And I know there's somebody listening that says, I have a kid who reads really well and does math poorly. And I have a kid who, struggles more with reading, but, math, no big deal. We were doing exponents the other day and she's 7, right? She just gets it. And so,
but reading, not so much.
Not so much. And so, having the patience to understand that this is a long game. There are no built-in expectations. They're going to get the stuff over time and everything. And the patience may be different for an older student. If you're sitting here homeschooling, an 8th grader or 9th grader, freshman in high school, the patience may be about them actually doing their work.
Right, because you're
getting their projects done.
You're not directly supervising them. And it can be really difficult to not be frustrated when you know that your student's not grasping a concept because they're just not paying attention.
Exactly.
They're not giving it their full effort. They're doing, a half-baked job because they just don't want to. And that's when I think it's most difficult to keep our cool, is when we're like, we're trying to teach them, we're trying to make it engaging, we're trying to make it fun, and that they're not giving you an equal level of engagement, right? You're like, hey, I'm putting out this much effort and you're giving me this tiny little bit of effort, and then you're complaining that you don't understand it, and that can be really tough. And so it's difficult when you're adapting to this new role to try to find patience in those moments, or the wisdom to say, maybe this is not the right time for this, let's go on to something else.
But also you have you're right, and there's this issue with, we're adults and we can learn things really quick. When we're in our corporate lives or in your business world, your boss tells you to do something, or you're given a task or a responsibility and you run with it. And at the end of 2 weeks, boom, you got some new skills, you learned some new things, you put together something, and you've presented that. And you as an adult can really run with new information. I can learn anything right now. You give me 2 weeks and I can probably learn whatever that thing is. We have to approach the fact that these are kids and their speed of learning things is so much slower.
In some subjects. In some subjects, they'll learn really fast. And then it changes what you think, right?
But it's all incremental.
It is.
And sometimes those incremental steps can be really small. And like what you said, hey, I'm teaching you today, and they're not into it. But you might have made like a little progress, and then you come back tomorrow, maybe make a little bit more because it's a better day. They slept better. Maybe they're not hungry or whatever it might be. Oh man,
being hangry is the worst of it. When they're hungry, they can't learn.
I totally agree.
And that's why we go through so many snacks. All y'all homeschoolers out there, we go through a lot of snacks. These kids eat so much more that they're at home. But it's hard. You've got a kid who can really uptake one subject, like our daughter just really gets math, it clicks. Yeah. And then another subject that they don't. It's really hard to have patience across because you can maybe judge their learning speed off of that subject that they get really easily.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that, okay, this other one, this is a challenge.
Well, and learning speed is kind of an interesting thing because we have the pressure of the curriculum. Us as educators, you as a new educator are thinking, I got to finish this curriculum this year. And if I go at this speed, I'm never going to finish it. And you have that pressure. So you want them to move faster, or you want them to learn things faster. But you have to understand that maybe it's a little bit slower now, but once they get moving, maybe you'll finish it early, right?
Right.
Like there's a momentum coming that maybe you don't see. So as an educator, you have to adjust for that and account for that and understand that, well, you might be moving a little slower here, but maybe I'll move faster later because I'm doing the groundwork now. That we've talked about that with the math. Having good groundwork is allowing me to move faster now because she just gets it.
Right. Such good concept work. And I think it's one of those things where, you have to have the patience to step back and say, okay, maybe I need to adapt how I'm teaching this. Yeah. Maybe this isn't the right way. Maybe I need a new environment to teach this in. Maybe we need to go outside and teach. Maybe I need to put this aside and go to a field trip to help reinforce this topic. Or, you may have to, it's really hard when you've planned as the planner. It's really hard when you've planned something out and you've put all this effort into it and what you think your student will like, and then they hit some mental block and you've got to break through that. And you may have to just say, breathe out. It's okay that you maybe, quote unquote, wasted some time in your planning, and approach it in a different way.
Yep. And even just understanding that you may have to do several different things, several different adaptations before you find something that works.
Right.
This type of curriculum versus this type of curriculum. We've hopped through a number of preschool curriculums with our youngest.
Right.
And we're just realizing that every time we get the new one, we're like, wow, she's just moving faster. We need to go faster.
Yeah, or she's not digging this the way that our other daughter did.
She doesn't dig classical music and the art as much. She wants to listen to Guns N' Roses and do color by numbers. Okay, fine, I'm cool with that.
She's not wrong. Yeah. She's not wrong.
A little bit GNR is fine.
And, sometimes we're giving you the permission here. It's okay to have a parent timeout, and we do this.
Oh, I do it all the time.
And we say this to each other when we see it, like, you might need a timeout. And that's the time where
1 minute for every year you're old. So,
man, I love it.
The older we get, the longer these timeouts get.
It's fantastic. Yeah. Don't push yourself so hard that you snap. If you are really frustrated, you really lost your patience. I remember when we first started homeschooling, you were seriously worried about this because you're like, I am not a patient person by nature.
No, I'm not.
You really felt like this was going to be I remember you saying, this is going to be my biggest challenge because I'm not patient. I don't like loud noise and I'm not patient. And now look at you.
We all do it. You're going to snap and you're going to get angry and you're going to get upset and you're going to have to break it and you're going to have to come back. It's totally fine. We've all been there. Every homeschooler's been there. We've all snapped.
Practice your apologies.
Practice your apologies.
And that's what we do,
and move
right?
Forward, yeah.
We with our kids too. Just because I think that we talked about them not giving an equal amount of effort, and we don't just let that go necessarily. We do try to redirect. We try to go into something else, but we do come back and say, Daddy or Mommy is putting a lot of effort in here, and you're not. And usually they're like, I'm sorry. I should have put in the equal amount of effort. I should have recognized that you cared to put in, whatever planning that you did.
That's part of that partnership,
It's part of the partnership. So it's, there's sometimes sorries on both sides too when we snap and go, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. But it's okay before you snap to take a time out, say, kids, go watch some PBS Kids for a few minutes. We do this all the time.
All the time.
Kids, we now need a PBS Kids break, and they go over to the Roku and they turn on PBS Kids and they watch one of the shows there and they learn something while we just take a breath, reset. Don't be afraid to, take a time out.
Well, and that leads right into the idea of dealing with resistance. You're always going to get resistance. I don't think it's unique to a homeschool. I think it's everywhere. Whether they're in the public schools or private schools or co-ops.
How many people are fighting over homework with their kids all the time?
All the time.
From public school.
Exactly.
Resistance from kids is just, they're always pushing those boundaries.
Yeah.
And they don't have the grasp of why something's important for them to learn at this age. That's something we can help them with why this is important, because it's the building block to get to something else and whatever. But dealing with resistance is kind of a universal parenting problem, except that now you're going to be dealing with it. Yeah, I can't just...
You deal with it more now.
You deal with it more because everything comes back to you. You're the one giving out all of the assignments. It's not like, teacher so-and-so can't be the bad guy. It's you.
Well, and the resistance can come from, a bunch of different places, and it's super important to find out where that's coming from. Like what we said a little bit earlier, are they hangry? Are they tired? Are they struggling with the subject? Is this not the thing they like? Is this curriculum maybe not the right way we need to go? Do I need to approach this in a different way?
Are they distracted and so they can't focus and so they just don't want to do it?
Do they need physical activity before they start doing their education? We don't know, right? So, and that's really going to be on you as the parent to understand deeply what your child needs. And the benefit is you have that knowledge. You're with them all the time, and you understand, before you even started educating when they were 5, when you were doing numbers and countings, and you're driving down the road and you're doing I Spy games and stuff, and you're learning and you're doing all these activities, but maybe it doesn't not in a formalized way.
Right.
You have already had a lot of experience on what your kid is like. You know what your kid is like. Oh, Timmy doesn't like it when I'm just quizzing him all the time. He loves it when he goes and does these activities, or he loves it when he's learning via art, right? When he's mixing colors, then we can learn our colors, right? You've already learned this, and you have a deep knowledge and understanding. And I think that's actually kind of the benefit of homeschooling, is that you are a built-in, deeply knowledgeable person about these kids, and you can break through this resistance, find out what is halting the educational process.
Right, because
where a public school teacher won't have that time.
They won't have the time, and they won't have that knowledge of your child. Exactly. And, as humans, we naturally want to learn. All humans want to learn.
Of course.
So if your kids are resisting learning, something is wrong that you need to figure out. And it could be they're tired, or it could be they're hungry, or this isn't working, or whatever. But we have to assume, just like we have to assume positive intentions in people, we have to assume that our kids want to learn. Mm-hmm. And if they don't, something's going on.
Yeah, and that's all being the empathetic. And going back to that word partnership, being empathetic in this partnership and saying...
And being curious.
And knowing this kid wants to learn stuff. And it may not be... And the hard part for us is like, well, I want you to learn to read. I want you to learn to write. I want you to learn to do math. But you want to do Minecraft. You want to do Legos. And you want to do playing in the mud and building sculptures and stuff. And you go, okay, how can I leverage that stuff? And that's where that patience and finding the determination and crafting in a creative way, which can be very difficult and very tiring, right? Because if you're having to create on the fly all the time, it can be very frustrating that I'm not very good at this, or I feel like every day I wake up and I don't know anything, and I have to, it's like the 51st dates, right? You wake up on a boat, and who's this guy and who's this girl, and why is my dad on this boat, and why am I in Alaska, right? Every day it feels like you're having to reinvent the wheel every single time. And that can be very taxing and trying if you are having to adapt in those ways. But, having this partnership, having the communication, knowing what you need to do is, I think, the key. In
general, if you're curious, you will find the keys to your kid, and you won't be adapting every day. I mean, there are some weeks where it's like that, truly.
It is. It really
is.
But
there are others where it's like, okay, hey, we're in the groove. And as your kids get older, this changes too. The things that they're resistant to, you talked about, wanting to make mud sculptures, right? That might be your youngest learner is just like not doing it if it's not outside. Whereas, and we kind of had this where we had to like leverage Lego really early, because that's kind of what our older daughter wanted. But now that she's almost 8, now we can say like, hey, if you can get your math done, you can have an extra half hour of Lego time. Yep. And so now we don't have to teach in Legos, but Legos is her end goal. And so she'll do the things that she needs to do. And it always is changing. So, this message about resistance is just expect it and know that you are going to have to deal with it, and think about some ways that you might deal with that while keeping your patience.
So moving from that, breaking through the resistance, we have said, the assessment and the feedback is the key thing. And I think a lot of times when you're becoming that educator for the first time, understanding how to assess when your child learns something. I ran into this a lot.
Right. Are they actually learning? I mean, I'm teaching it. Do they know it?
Yeah, spoilers, we're going to be interviewing someone from All About Reading, and boy, do I have some questions for them.
Oh, that poor lady.
I know, but it's not about their curriculum, but just in teaching to read in general, it's like, okay, I have all these cards. Do I need to be going back? I'm in lesson 38. Do I need to be reviewing every week lessons 3 and 4 cards?
Right. Like, how much are they supposed to retain? Yeah. And knowing when to assess is really, it's tough, but regular and, formal and informal assessments, they can be really helpful instead of waiting till the end of the year. If you wait till the very end and then say, okay, what have you learned? That can be really hard.
And you may need to craft some assessments.
That's right.
If your curriculum doesn't have that built in.
Yeah, and this allows you to course correct as you're going on your way. So informal assessments, we do lots of informal assessments. I get home from work and we sit down to the dinner table and you'll say, hey, kiddo, tell mom what you learned today. And she's like, oh, mom. And she goes into all the stuff. And then even the little one's like, mommy, yeah, we knew this. And, we are informally assessing her at the dinner table.
Yeah.
She doesn't know that, but we're just kind of,
it's doing that recall activity where you learn something,
what did they
recall
learn?
it, you teach it back, and now I know it, right? Isn't there there's some acronym there where it's like, I learn, I assess, I write, I recall,
I don't know.
and
You'll
I teach
find it
it
for the show notes.
I'll put it for the show notes.
But that's something that you can do. And then if there is formal assessment, something like, Math Mammoth or
quizzes,
Right Start that come with assessments, that's great. If not, you can make up your own assessments. You can get assessments made. There's lots of places online to do it, or you can use AI if you want to say, hey, give me a quick test for first grade level on this book, some comprehension questions to ask or whatever. You can do different things to assess, but it's really important to assess regularly, carefully. It's not like you're testing your kids all the time, but just to know,
it tells you as an educator that you're doing
getting
a good
through?
job. Yeah, am I doing a good job?
Right. It's helpful to have that feedback. Formal assessments are really great with things like math and spelling and science, where the quizzes are just really easy to make. Mm-hmm. But I'd recommend more informal assessments when you're doing creative subjects. So, you're doing reading, you want to know about their comprehension, or you're doing history, and what did they take away?
I do this with math sometimes if we've learned a new concept, like we're deep into multiplication right now. And I will just pull up a piece of paper and I'll give her some examples that are very similar to the ones we just did, but little tweaks and stuff. And I'll ask her to go ahead and do this. Like one of my favorite things to do right now, it's like, okay, 5 plus 5 plus 5 is another way of saying 5 times 3. And then I go, okay, great. What is 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5? It's 5 times 5. Great. Now simplify it into exponents, 5 squared. And then I want you to go or I'll have her go the other direction, where I'll say, here's 5 squared. Go all the way to addition. So she has to break it into multiplication and then break that into
awesome.
Addition. So she's going up and down that tree, and it's just driving home that idea that, okay, exponents is just another.
These are all the same.
This is all the same thing, right? It's all addition.
We did more of that when I was
Yeah.
in school.
So I'll do those little assessments like that where I'm just driving home those concepts. Reading's the same way. I'll just have her do, we're doing like letter tiles on the board. And I'll do the ones in all about reading or, whatever reading curriculum you're doing, but I'm doing these letter tiles on a magnet board, and I'll do the words that they ask me to do, and I'll do the words that are on the sheet. But if there's a word I know that's not like that, I'll put it, or if it's a little bit more difficult, right. Or if it's a compound word where it's like, stove, but it's like a hot, I'll do like a sentence like a hot stove, or, like sticks, and you could do like, I don't know, like you can build a compound word that's a little bit more complex. They do this in the
fish sticks.
Fish sticks, thank you. So like you'll do fish sticks, and then she'll have to read the bigger word, and like you could just make things up. But those are good ways to assess whether or not they're understanding what they're reading, and then recalling something that
right.
they've learned before.
And that's making some small formal assessments.
Yeah.
One of the other things you can do informally, we like to play games, of course. So we play reading games with our older daughter. With our younger, who's just doing letter recognition for preschool now, like we played Scrabble Junior a couple weeks back, and as she had to recognize the letters, so she could put them down, and she said them as she was putting them down. I'm like, great, she's learning her letters. Yeah. Other ideas for informal assessment too, you can do things like, acting out a scene from a book. That's a great way to kind of test their comprehension.
Well, and that's kind of funny because in the Build Your Library curriculum right now, they do these narrative activities where you have to pick things regarding the book that you're reading. Mm-hmm. And you're right. Like that was just a great way of learning
Why don't you
recall what you've learned. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great idea. The other thing you could do, like have a debate, have two students pick different characters from a book, and how would they talk or how would they act?
Just making it fun.
Yeah, there's lots of fun ways to assess, but it really is a good idea to figure out what might work for your learner, because you do need to know if, you're being effective, it's confidence building, but also do we need to change course and try to adapt something?
Next thing is, just homeschooling together, right? The whole name of our podcast is the idea that there's a whole community of people out there homeschooling and leaning and leveraging a community around you to assist you in becoming a better educator, whatever that might be, right?
You can't do this in a vacuum.
No, you can't.
You really need support from other parent educators. You got to compare notes. You need to get advice. You just need to.
You can do this online or in person. Yeah, absolutely.
Other parents are just a really great source of ideas. They can, really help you through some specific struggles and give you their own experience and help you not feel so isolated or alone when you're going through this, because it is tough. This is a transition, and I love to sit down with other homeschool parents and kind of just talk shop.
Yeah, like we did that the other day. We had some friends over and we're like, have you noticed an increase in the sass lately?
Oh, yeah.
Like, they kind of looked at us and said, I mean, not any more than we already get.
It's good, because it's fun because our kids aren't static, right? They're learning and they're changing and they're growing, and then they're going through their own phases of childhood. Mm-hmm. So you're right. It is fun to be able to talk with other parents and say, like, I'm just hitting this new roadblock. Mm-hmm. And even we've been homeschooling for a number of years, and we hit roadblocks, regularly.
All the time.
So it's great to be able to bounce things off other parents.
And I'm about to go, full hog on 2 kids now. Like, I'm going to have, we've been kind of playing with curriculum and doing little things here and there. And, I do stuff every day, but I'm now starting to formally do stuff with my youngest because she's ready for it. And she's ready to learn. She's ready to do math. She's ready to do, kind of a torchlight pre-K type of curriculum where we're reading a lot of books and we're talking about emotions and all that stuff. Just what I did with my oldest 4 years ago. She's ready for it now. And that's only going to become, I'm going to have now a whole new set of problems I have to solve and look for other things. So it's really nice to have other parents to, ask that question, like, what did you do for this? I'm having this trouble or this struggle. It doesn't have to happen in a vacuum, and you don't have to do this alone.
That's right. And so definitely find your local homeschool friends, find your co-op or your meetup. It's great to have some in-person friends, but it's also great to have an online community of folks. This is where some of the Facebook groups can be really helpful. We have a very wonderfully helpful Facebook group. And one of the things I like about that is it's kind of immediate support. Yeah. I have homeschool friends, but I don't see them all the time. I can't just ask my questions, at 11 o'clock at night, like, I'm having such and such problem. I can't figure out how to plan for tomorrow. But there's always some folks online. So if you can join a really good group, and there's groups for every state. So, find some folks online that you can bounce ideas off of. Community is really important in homeschooling. And,
community leads to learning. Learning is a continuous process, something that we always have to be doing. Even as homeschool educators, homeschooling is always changing. The laws are changing. There's new things coming in.
Yeah, there's new curriculum. There's new ideas about the best practices and ways to teach. So really continuously learning is an important part of being a parent educator, because it's like a job. So you have to continue to grow and evolve, learn what's new in homeschooling, and the community can really help you to stay on top of things, because I have a really hard time. It's not like there's, an easy news source I can just go and grab everying from. So being online and talking with those parents is helpful.
It's the beauty of the wisdom of the crowds, where you have this crowdsourced wisdom that gets brought to, a Facebook group like ours, or some of the other numerous other secular homeschooling Facebook groups. Just wonderful people. They all have opinions. They're all doing different things, and those opinions might be very big and maybe very small, but you can get a lot of great input and learn the lay of the land, and then pick what works best for you. And that's always the best thing, is that you don't always have to do what other people do,
right?
But you may learn 1 or 2 things that you can apply. You don't have to do exactly.
I've learned so much from other parents.
Exactly.
I would say I've learned everything from other parents.
Yeah, really. It's weird because we have this podcast where we're telling ideas and whatnot, but we're by no way experts in any of this, and I don't think anyone is an expert. Everyone does it their own little way. Everybody has their own experiences, and they can bring those to the public market and tell everybody what they've done. It's great.
Absolutely. And the final thing is for accepting this new role and adapting into being a parent educator, you hear this talk about self-care. We did a whole month on it. We did a whole month on it earlier this year. If you haven't listened to that, go ahead and do. But self-care is important as a person. But now you've taken on this extra role. It's really important now that you've taken on being a parent educator. It's like as if it wasn't exhausting enough to be a parent, then now you have to add all of these responsibilities to your life. So you've got to take care of your home and, keep your family fed and all the things you've got to do. And
manage your health, manage your fitness,
look after your kids, and homeschool them now. Okay, great. That's just homeschooling.
All the places you have to go and all the,
we're running around constantly. We have a crazy calendar that
we just looked at it, and I'm scared. Errol, I'm scared. I'm so scared.
It's like we have so many things that we've got to do. So it's really busy. It can be exhausting. It can be draining. So you really have to take care of yourself. It's important.
And yeah, like I that's such an important thing for me because I have hobbies. I'm trying to get all this stuff done, trying to keep the house clean, keeping everybody fed, taking care of the dog who's twitch sleeping here about 3 feet from me.
Chasing something.
She's chasing something. It's a squirrel. Spoilers. It's a squirrel. And just keeping yourself happy and healthy so that you don't burn out is probably the most important thing.
Because homeschooling is not the easy path.
It's not.
This is not the easy path to do. You have chosen the harder choice. We believe it's a wonderful choice, and we hope it is for your family as well.
I think it's worth it,
Yeah, but it's not easy, and it does take more out of you than just parenting because you have all this planning and preparation, and you're kind of on. We joke that you're kind of the cruise director all day, like making sure that, we go from one activity to the next and do this, and that can be really exhausting. So really be kind to yourself and don't forget to meet your needs so that you can meet the needs of your kiddos, and set aside some time for yourself each day. You need to recharge. If you got to relax somehow, whether that's hobbies or spending time with friends, or you need to just
working
exercise.
out. Yeah, whatever you need to do.
And give yourself lots of grace, especially at the beginning, because you're doing your best. And you're only going to get more comfortable and more skilled at being a parent educator as you gain experience. This is an evolution.
Yeah, without a doubt, you definitely get better over time, especially if you're sitting here and you're like, oh, it's my first year. It was really rough, but we're doing good and I'm going to move on and everything. It just gets better and better and better over time. You become more and more knowledgeable about the process, and you start to get more comfortable with the idea that it is a process. And this is something that's going to take, a decade and a half for you to finally get, this little 4-year-old or 5-year-old kid that's a little ball of energy and get them hopefully into college at the end. And it's a long process, and it's
a long game. Focus on the long game.
game.
Just give yourself grace. I've seen a lot of posts lately of, so excited to have our first day of homeschool. Oh my God, my first day was so bad, or whatever. If you're new, just give yourself some time to settle in. This is an adaptation, and it doesn't happen overnight. So we hope this is helpful. Take these things into consideration, and we hope that it helps you as you start out your homeschooling journey. And for those of you who are experienced homeschoolers, remember, I think even as experienced homeschoolers, we sometimes forget some of these things, to give ourselves grace, to remember that we might have to adapt, to get deep in that well of patience when our kids are being so frustrating.
I know.
So I think these are good lessons for us even. And I enjoyed actually writing these notes because it helped me reflect a little bit on the things that we can still continue to learn and do better. Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook, and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time.
Happy homeschooling!